Hi! Long time no here! I'm kind of in a rush here because I just realized I've been postponing this video for so long. It's actually going to come out on the day of the Oscars or like the very night before, so that was not my intention at all. It just took me so long to see all of the movies I'm gonna be talking about, so it's Oscars time! I'm 25. So today we're gonna be discussing films that were nominated for Best Costume Design this year. And I shall do it chronologically from the first one I've seen till the last one I've seen. The first one of the... wait, actually I probably need a list because I'm gonna forget. The first movie I'm gonna be talking about today is the first one I've seen of all these, which is Black Panther. Black Panther, in terms of like costume design from all the movies, it's the one that's the least my type. I mean, I'm really into period dramas, of course, and I'm really into female costume design. So in Black Panther, both of these were not really applicable. Like, there was a lot of female characters, of course, but the main characters, most of them were male, and also a lot of like background people and people important for the plot were actually male, and it was not a pure drama. So in terms of that, it's not really my style, it's not my type of costume design, but I do appreciate the way it plays with various textures, the way it you know, creates a world that you feel you know somehow, like you feel you know all those African influences, you feel like you've seen all those cultures before, except they don't exist. So I think that's amazing. I think that's an incredible thing. It's a really incredibly hard thing to do, actually, to make you feel like you've seen something you've never seen before, you know? And the way the fabrics are used, the way the fabrics and textures are used is also absolutely incredible. So I think it might actually be a strong contender. I just feel like it might win. So the second movie I've seen was Mary Poppins Returns. I was really excited about this one because I love the classic one, like the original, the OG Mary Poppins. I loved it as a child. It's just so cute, and I was actually a bit worried that this one might be like over the top or too much, but in terms of costume design, I think it's done its job. I was a bit surprised about the choice of the era. Like, Mary Poppins was always very Edwardian to me, but I was glad to see that they kind of went with the same color palette. Even, like, you know, the iconic Mary Poppins looks from the first movie were like white, red and blue, and they kind of went with that and they just rearranged that a bit. I loved the way she was dressed, like properly 1930s, but you could see some elements of like quirkiness in the design. So for example, her outfit was like a blouse with like polka dots and then a skirt with stripes or something like that, you know, those like pattern combinations that are not necessarily the first thing you think when you say 1930s, but at the same time they were not like out of place. They were not like absolutely, you know, detached from what 1930s fashion was. Though I must say that the most like 1930s looks in the movie were actually some background characters and this lady with the dog, I can't remember her name. She was supposed to be this like extravagant lady. Her looks were my favorites from the movie. Very cool. I don't think it's gonna win though. I quite enjoyed the more complex costumes from those like fantasy scenes in Mary Poppins, though the ones in the music hall were awful. Like, there was this one costume where she was wearing a weird wig, and that was absolutely, I don't know, there's just something steampunky about it I really hated, but other than that I think it's a really cool piece of costume design. The next one is The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and it's actually hard to say anything about it because I'm not an expert in men's fashion. So most of the stories that were told in the movie were centered around cowboys and people with guns that are not usually women. And I thought the men's clothing in the film was done really well, and especially those costumes that were supposed to be like really ragged. I think my favorite pieces of costuming from the movie were in that story with the disabled guy without hands or legs and his like mentor, you know, all of these poor people visiting. I think that was really like nicely done, very very like authentic. But when it comes to like the only female characters that appeared in the movie, that was a huge misunderstanding. Okay, so let me just start off with the first character I think that appears in the movie. It's in this story where the guy gets hanged at the end of the story. It's kind of a spoiler, but you don't know who, so and he looks at this girl and she's wearing this kind of an okay dress, and then she's wearing this horrible, awful bonnet that brings me back to like really awful memories of searching Victorian on eBay, and it's the first thing that shows up are those like awful bonnets that are only made of fabric, and it's really bad. It's like her hair is wrong too, but like mostly the bonnet is what irks me, and it's also the same fabric as her dress, and it just screams like the cheapest eBay stuff that you can find. Then there is this other girl in the story that's the whole story is about a girl. I can't remember. It has girl in the title though, weirdly. The girl's costumes are... There's this dinner scene where she's wearing quite a nice dress. Then she starts traveling and that's where it kind of gets wrong again. Her dresses are really floppy. She looks like she's not wearing any corset on. And then she's also donning this awful bonnet, like not stiff at all. It just looks crap. I don't know. Of course, there had to be some loose hair, you know, in a braid or something. It's like, who would wear that? Like, I know you're trying to go for poor people, but they would not do that either. So I really didn't like costumes in that one. And then there's this lady in a carriage. She's wearing like a first Bustle era gown, I think. This one is a bit better, though still there is just something about the way it fits and the choice of the... I don't know. It's just not completely authentic to me in terms of like historical dress. So I'd say no to Buster Scruggs. so the next one I've seen was the favorite, and it was my favorite! In terms of costume designs, it completely bought me from the very beginning to the very end. I am not an expert in like early 18th century, but it just blew me away. I think what they did, what was so cool about the whole process was that they took the silhouette as it was without some like huge adjustments. So they took the silhouette as it was and they only combined the historical silhouette with modern fabrics, with modern textures, with modern fabrics, with modern patterns, and also they made all of the costumes sort of black and white, which in terms of costume design is a really bold idea, especially in an era like that, which was very like colorful, you know, bold, powerful. The colors were usually really rich, especially when it comes to like really high classes, and this is as high as you can get in England at that time. So I think it's really a bold artistic choice, and it just paid off so well because it just looks amazing. And especially when it's combined with all the interiors, which are usually like really dark wood, heavy decoration, and then you have those like minimalistic sort of fabrics and costumes, and it's only the drapery that's kind of giving it life. So cool! It's just so good. And then you have the like masculine costumes that Rachel character is wearing. I could just frame it, honestly. It was just so good. I think it's a prime example of how you can do historical costuming without disrespecting the era that you're trying to portray. It's such a good example of how you can do period drama costumes right. And then the last one I've seen was Mary Queen of Scots, and I was actually expecting a lot more from the costumes in that movie. I was kind of expecting them to be really rich, complex and detailed, and you know, embroidery everywhere and like pearls hanging from every possible piece of fabric that is on screen, and it was actually really simple and minimalistic. And I think as much of an artistic choice that is, it's not really fitting the idea of fashion that functioned at the time, especially in the Elizabethan context when it was like as rich as you can get it. I don't think there was any other era in history of like English clothing where clothes are literally like dripping with jewelry and, you know, embroidery and stuff like that. So I found that particular choice a bit odd, especially when you had that scene when a guy is coming to visit Queen Mary and she's basically dressed in the same way as all of her maids, and he can't tell which one is the queen. I think in Elizabethan England, this is something that would never happen. Like, you would always make sure the queen herself looks like a piece of, I don't know, art, like a Joel. And you could actually see that in some scenes where Mary was posing for a portrait and her outfit was like really plain and her hair was kind of like loose, and then on the portrait it was like super fancy. So you could see the difference between what it was supposed to look like, whether what they decided it should look like. And I think it, as much as it brought this like harshness, maybe that's what they were looking for in terms of the Scottish costumes. Like, you know, the Scottish costumes were supposed to be like really raw and kind of earthy tones and all of that stuff. I think they might have missed some of the decorum that was very typical for the era. It's kind of an example of how you overdo it, how you know, disregard kind of like a primary characteristics of the era. Like in terms of fashion at least, you know, like you just don't respect the way they looked at things. I think The Favourite respected the way people from 1700 looked at fashion. So yeah, summing up, I think two films that might win are either The Favourite or Black Panther. The Favourite would be my choice personally, but I would also be kind of glad if Black Panther won, because it's a really nice change in the costume design nominations, and it's just something else, you know. Period dramas, we have them every year. I think I'm gonna run and edit this before the Oscars start, and this video is going to be completely irrelevant because all of you are going to know who won anyway. So I'm actually really excited to watch the Oscars. Nice